Kjære alle sammen, en riktig god morgen og velkommen hit til oss i Agenda. I dag skal vi snakke om noen av de største spørsmålene i vår tid. Noe som påvirker oss hver dag, og som de aller fleste av oss nok egentlig tenker ganske lite på, sånn i hverdagen. Men før vi kommer i gang med dagens program, så skal jeg si at i likhet med dere, så holder vi koken helt inn mot sommeren. Og vi skal ha vårt neste møte, som et frokostmøte 4. juni. Da lanserer vi et nytt notat om Norge som fredsnasjon. Vi det? Bør vi være det? Kan vi være det? Inn i fremtiden, dit kommer blant annet utenriksminister Ine Eriksen Søreide, og stort sett det som å krype og gå av viktige utenrikspolitikere på Stortinget. Så dit håper vi mange av dere vil finne veien. Samme kveld, 4. juni, har vi et kveldsmøte her om demokrati på arbeidsplassen. Det også knyttet opp til utviklingen av ny teknologi, spørsmålet vi skal diskutere her i dag. Det handler om hvordan skal vi klare å ha et demokratisk forhold til eierskap i en tid hvor vi har en økonomi hvor veldig mye bindes opp i teknologi. Det skal være her på kvelden, og dit kommer blant annet Bo Rothstein og vår egen Hilde Nagel. Så dit dere hjertelig velkomne. Vi utrolig glade for å få lov til å ha dette arrangementet i samarbeid med Oslo Freedom Forum. Det et arrangement som henter til Oslo et enormt oppbud av kompetanse fra hele verden. Det handler om menneskerettigheter, det handler om frihet. Det begynner i dag etter lunsj på sentralen. Der skal de ha noe som heter Tech Lab, hvor de skal plukke opp igjen mange av trådene fra dagens møte. Og jeg skal hilse fra Oslo Freedom Forum og si at dit alle hjertelige velkommen. Jeg heter Kaja Storvik, og jeg for tida leder i Agenda. Og nå skal vi flytte oss tilbake til dagens møte. And we're going to switch languages, because it's a little bit rude for the guests to talk Norwegian, because most of them don't speak it. So, a warm welcome. We are going to start today with looking at China. How does China apply the new technology? What happens with Chinese government's possibilities? And we're going to do that with an outlook from Hong Kong. And I'm going to introduce all the speakers when they come up. So we're starting with you, Shirry Heung. Please welcome. You're a human rights activist. You specialize in deliberations. You have been central in the Civic Party in Hong Kong and also in the Umbrella Movement. Yeah. And you are going to give us an overview and understanding in 10 minutes. So, you're going to have a very concentrated time about what is happening in China. So the floor is yours, please.
Okay, so hello everybody. So I'm Shirry from Hong Kong. So today I will give you a very brief presentation on what is happening in Hong Kong after the Umbrella Movement. So, because I think many of you heard of Hong Kong again, it is in 2014, right after the Umbrella Movement. So you may don't have much idea about what is going on after the Umbrella Movement. So I will give you some updates on it. And also I will also talk about the POFO system, which is an electronic voting system we use in Hong Kong for civil referendums, because we don't have an official referendum in Hong Kong. So after the Umbrella Movement, because we still cannot have universal suffrage after the Umbrella Movement, there is a group of youngsters who call themselves localisms, who are raised after the Umbrella Movement, and they are more radical than the traditional political groups, and they think Hong Kong should be is not China, so Hong Kong should be separated from China, and they also seek for Hong Kong independence, and there is some conflicts between the younger generations and the older generations, because the younger generations also questions the usefulness of peaceful protests, because we have peaceful protests since the 1990s. And we do not have any progress on the democracy. So they would like to turn the protests into a more radical rate. And which this one is the Mongol unrest, which is during the Chinese New Year, the first day of the Chinese New Year. Some localists want to protest the traditional culture of having hawkers on the streets selling foods during the Chinese New Year's, and then they later have conflicts with the police, and which turn out to be the Mongol unrest. And they also stress that they have to fight for the freedom with blood and sweat, so they have to sacrifice something or sacrifice themselves in order to get democracy for Hong Kong. So after the Mongol unrest, we have massive political persecutions in Hong Kong. There were more than 1,000 people were arrested for the Occupy movement in 2014, and 216 were being persecuted. And there's lots of hearings still going on in Hong Kong nowadays, which about the Occupy movement. It's like for Professor Benny Tai, who was the initiator of Occupy Central, will be having the formal trial in November this year. And for the Mongol unrest, which I explained a bit in the last slide, there were 91 people were arrested there, and more than 20 people were prosecuted for riots. And you know, riots is is a very serious crime in Hong Kong, and with a maximum penalty of at 10 years imprisonment. So there's some cases there are some people being sentenced for riots in Hong Kong already, and they usually got 3 to 4 years imprisonment in Hong Kong. So it's quite a lot for the youngsters, because they're still very young. Some of them are only in the 19s or 20s. So beside the political prosecutions, we also have some changes in the Legislative Council election and also the District Council elections in Hong Kong. The Legislative Council is just like the Parliament in UK. So we elect some legislative councillor to review some bills or to pass some bills in the government. And in the 1961, the government has imposed some new requirements, which is the candidates all have to sign a confirmation form, which is very new to Hong Kong. And in the form, they have to make a promise that they will uphold the Hong Kong Basic Law, and they are like loyal to the Hong Kong government and also the Chinese government. So because of this form, 6 candidates was barred from running the elections because of their political views. Most of them are fighting for Hong Kong independence. So and then they said, oh, because you are fighting for Hong Kong independence, then you will not be upholding Hong Kong basic laws, and you will not be loyal to the Chinese and Hong Kong government. So you were out. And this confirmation form is now being used in both Legislative Council elections and also the District Council elections too. And if you have known about Joshua Wong's political parties is also being barred from this confirmation form. So, which means they cannot be a political party anymore, because if they use the title of the Demo Sisters, which is the political parties, then they will not be allowed to run for elections. And because of all those attacks or all those barriers in the Legislative Council, and so in 2016, we have some ideas from the civil society that we have to use our vote wisely. So we have the funded Go projects, which help to help the voter to decide which one they should vote for. So this one is headed by the Benny Time, which is one of the Occupy Central initiators and also a civic parties. And this is why we are having this because we would like to maximize the winning chance of the pan-democratic camps. And because the pan-democratic camp cannot come up with, because in Hong Kong, like, we have five seats for each district constituency. But if we have more than 5 political parties would like to run for the space, then we will have to make some sacrifice. Maybe some will go for the other districts, and some will run for in this district. But we cannot do this. We do not have consensus within the political parties during the Legislative Council elections, so we have to run it ourselves. So the idea is that we are using the Telegram technologies, so we built a chatbot in Telegram called Vosoner, and the voters, which is the supporters of these funded Go projects, if they have preference on which particular candidates they would like to vote from, then they will go vote first, and then they report back using this Telegram chatbots. So we will have some data collected. So who have a bigger winning chance, who have a very small winning chance, we have it, all the information that we collected. And for those who do not have any preference on which candidates they would like to vote for, but they just know that they would want to vote for pan-democratic camp's candidates, so they will have to wait after 8 p.m. that night. So when we have all the data being run, it's like, for example, 803 candidate, they have 25% of people vote for him. So we will tell people to go for the first three candidates on this list, to make sure that they do not waste the votes in the candidates which have very limited chance to win. So in the 2016 Legislative Council elections, we have the highest turnout rates of 58% in Hong Kong, which is the highest one since the handover of Hong Kong. And we also got the most number of seats doing that. But after the 2016 Legislative Council elections, the Hong Kong government also disqualified 6 of the elected members because saying that they have breached the requirement of off-taking, because during the off-taking procedure, some legislative councillor will do some protests during the off-taking procedure to show that they are not satisfied with the government acceptors. But it was being allowed before, but for this year they changed the rules and say, oh no, this is not allowed, so you are now being disqualified. And that's why we have to have another by-elections to re-elected the 6 legislative councillor for being disqualified. And because we still cannot resolve the inner conflicts between the political parties, so we decided to have a primary elections on the pan-democratic camps. So it would say, if you are from the pan-democratic camps and you would like to run for the elections, you can join our primary elections. And if you can win in our primary elections, and then you can, the whole pan-democratic camps will support you to go for a real elections. So what we are using here is the portfolio system, which I have been working for several years. And which I would like to explain more about the POFO system here. The POFO system was actually developed in 2012 because in 2012 we have our chief executive elections, but normal people like us do not have a chance to vote for our chief executive. So the public opinion program of the University of Hong Kong, they have designed the POFO system so that people can come and vote to make a vote and to tell the government which chief executive they would like to get. So this is the first POFO activities, and then we have more than 200,000 of people participate in the voting. And the other very big one is the Occupy Central with Love and Peace civil referendums, which is just before the umbrella movement. People can come out and vote for, because we were discussing about the political package and political reform platform. And so people can come out to reduce deliberations and all those things to hope that people can make up their own political reform proposal to the government. So we invite people to come out and vote for their favorite political reform proposal in 2014. And this is the civil referendums with Occupy Central with Love and Peace. And we got very great success. We got nearly 8,000 people coming out to vote for this program, to vote for their favorite political reform proposal. And we also used it last year for the 2017 chief executive election civil referendums. But you can see the total number has fallen quite a lot. It's only 65,000 people come out and vote. And we are still working very hard to maintain the POFO system or to modify the POFO system, because we think this is the way that we can let the true opinions of Hong Kong to be voiced out using the POFO system. But we still have a lot of challenge ahead, and that's why I have been here to Norway and to looking for help, or maybe looking for some connections with the IT industry. So people are actually questioning the usefulness of civil referendums, because it's like we have organized a few great civil referendum before, but the government did not respond at all. And they also question about the online voting securities, because it's like every time we have a civil referendum, we will get a state-level attack. They attack a server and trying to steal some personal data, trying to avoid us or to stop the whole votings. And we also got some problems about the voter identification. So we have to make the POFO system very credible, and then we have to identify to make sure no one is stealing others' identity to come and vote. So we are now asking them to give us the ID card numbers and also their mobile phone numbers to receive an SMS. So just for the SMS verifications. But since the political situation in Hong Kong has changed a lot since the umbrella movement, some people are very concerned about giving out too much personal identities to us, which the government may be able to get the database from us, and they will be in danger. So we are trying to modify what kinds of identification we may go further, or we may explore to replace the ID card number one. And the other thing is for the portfolio, we have it on the electronic means, and also we have the physical means. But the problem is we have a hard time for finding out physical polling stations. So if the government would like to stop it, they can stop it there, because they can stop lending us like venues to hold the polling stations. And also it's about the cost, because we need a lot of time and a lot of efforts and costs to develop the portfolio system. So I do not have time to go through all the details of the portfolio, but if you are interested in the portfolio system of Hong Kong, we may have a private chat after this presentations, and please feel free to come and ask me for more details. And thank you.
Thank you, Shirry. Please take a seat. That one. Thank you so much, Shirry. I'm very pleased to welcome up on stage Megha Rajagopalan. Is that right? Yeah. You are the China Bureau Chief and Asia Correspondent for BuzzFeed News, which I absolutely adore, by the way. Please take a seat. You have covered stories across Asia, and your recent work has been on technology and human rights, right?
Yeah.
And previously you worked for Reuters, right?
Yeah.
And you have been published in just about every major newspaper across the US, so better not to mention them, because then we wouldn't finish today.
Yeah.
So we're very happy to have you with us. So Shirry has told us about the situation in Hong Kong, and actually how you use technology to try to raise democracy and make it easier, but also that is problematic because the government are attacking your servers and trying to get information. And I hope that you, Megha, could tell us a little bit about how the Chinese government, because Hong Kong government and Chinese government is basically the same. How the Chinese government is using the new technology in their system. So if you could just explore a little bit around that thing.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of coverage in the news media about a whole basket of big data collection programs related to mass surveillance in China, and it's confusing because there are many kind of versions of these programs going on all at once, and it's very unclear how these programs are going to work together. But at their core, there's sort of a philosophy there that basically it starts with collecting large volumes of data about people, generally with very little consent involved, and the end game is to basically incentivize what they see as good behavior. So some of that good behavior would also be recognizable to us as the same, like not committing crimes, not jumping the queue in the subway, like all sorts of stuff like that. But it also includes things that we really wouldn't want in a good society, like targeting minority groups, targeting political dissidents, petitioners, things like that.
And what I wanted to know, because I think when we talk about China and we talk about technology, you sort of you envision this like very, very controlled society with sort of an almighty government, and it makes George Orwell seems like something very friendly back in the days. So, but how advanced is this? To what effect is it now affecting people's lives, and how do you think that will be in the years to come?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question. So I think the thing that's gotten the most coverage is something that's referred to as the social credit system, which exists in some forms now. There are 12 pilot programs in different cities around the country, and those kind of give us a little bit of a window into what it's going to be when they implement it on a national level in 2020. But at the end of the day, these are kind of like interlocking programs that all work together. And I'm sorry, could you repeat the second part of your question?
So how is it affecting people's life today? Is it actually already changing people's life?
Yes.
Like what options you have? And
right, so I guess there's two separate ways to answer that. So if you're a ethnic minority in China, your life is being affected like quite a lot by these programs, because it's a situation where there's sort of two standards. Like one is for so-called like ordinary people who aren't particularly political or doing anything that would be considered sensitive, and then there's a separate standard for people who are involved in those things, or you might be an ethnic minority, or you might be a sensitive person in some other respect. So if you're there in that second category, you're subject to all kinds of surveillance, like everything from like DNA databases, checks of your medical history, checks of your religious background, like all of these kinds of categories of data that we would be considering to be protected. If you're in that first category, there's also a significant volume of data collection, but you might actually not be that worried about it. So for instance, a lot of people in China, which is shown by public opinion polling, they want some kind of level of monitoring for institutions like companies, like places where they would buy food, for instance, or schools where they would send their kids. So they see this kind of like data collection as enabling that level of security. So right now it's at that phase. It's sort of at the phase where people see it as something that's incentivizing them to act in certain ways, but not necessarily a threat. But that being said, all of these big data programs are still evolving, and there's not a lot of clarity about what they're going to end up being. And I think there will be a lot more clarity once we get past this pilot stage and get to 2020.
I wanted to ask you, Shirry, what are the concerns in Hong Kong and the democracy movement there concerning these kinds of questions?
I think for the data, personal data collections in China and also in Hong Kong, right? One of the major things that affects Hong Kong people is that there are many electronic apps they are using. Is actually being developed by the state or the state-funded company. Is, for example, for communications, we have WhatsApp, and in China we have WeChat, right. And for and they also have Taobao,
yeah.
Which is the online shopping apps which have been using from within most of the Chinese people and also the Hong Kong people too. Right. So this is all this thing we are very worrying is that we think that Hong Kong people may be more able to accept the international apps rather than the state the apps being owned by the state. So for just like me, we use Signal, we use Telegram, we use WeChat, we use WhatsApp instead of WeChat. But the fact is, if there are some people have to do business with the Chinese people, then they have no choice but to turn to WeChat and so on. So this is what we are facing in Hong Kong too. So WeChat is being much more popular in Hong Kong than ever.
I wanted to ask, because obviously not being very free to express your opinions is nothing new in China. So that's basically the same. So it's the system and the availability of data that is changing with the technology. But I think what many people, at least I'm curious about, is how it will affect people and people's opinions, because this is going to be, the way you describe it, so massive. And what I'm wondering is, do you think people will feel oppressed and rebel and react to this in that way, or do you think it will make people fall even more into line? Because it's a micromanagement of people's lives and every action that is, maybe many would say, counter-natural to what people want.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, we should start by saying, there's 1.4 billion people that live in China, right? Yeah. So it's like, and we don't tend to see that because there's not a lot of tolerance for things like civil society groups and stuff like that. But there is that diversity of opinion, even if we don't see it. There's some very interesting polling that shows that like Chinese people really do care about privacy. Like there's this myth out there that they have a higher tolerance for invasions of privacy compared to consumers in the West, and like I just don't think that's necessarily true. There's this company called Baidu, which is sort of the Chinese version of Google, you could say, and the CEO of Baidu made this public statement basically saying, well, we don't have to worry about privacy because our consumers don't really care about it. And there was, like a public outcry. It was sort of like if, the CEO of Google had said that, people would be pretty upset. But I mean, that being said, I think that there's a much lower tolerance for invasions of privacy by these tech companies, which are seen as like kind of bad actors that are just going to send you targeted ads and try to profit from you, versus the government, which is seen as like, could have some sort of benevolent motivation, could be doing it in the name of greater security or other social goods. In terms of whether it's going to prompt any kind of pushback or rebellion, it's really hard to say. I mean, of course there are curbs on freedom of speech in China, but it's a spectrum, right? It's just like anything else. I think before the current president, Xi Jinping, took over, there was a lot greater tolerance for diversity of opinion, and we've really seen that spectrum narrow. I think the issue here is that it's not that they're forcing you to shut up. It's that they're saying that if you don't shut up, then you'll be denied all of these good things in life, right? You'll be denied the ability to get a loan. You'll be denied, an easy path to buying the apartment that you want. It might be harder for you to take a first-class seat on a train. So it's almost a little bit more insidious in that way, because it's really kind of a system of incentives, almost like a rewards program. And it sort of cajoles people into acting in ways that the state finds to be favorable.
It's more like nudging than putting people in
Yeah,
prison.
a little bit like that, yeah.
And also in Hong Kong, I think I observe is that we have more self-censorships now than ever, because people are worrying about the careers, people are worrying about the connections of the developments, and they realize that if I don't do something good to the Chinese government, or I keep saying something bad against the Chinese government, then they are afraid that they will be monitored, or somehow someone will send a small report to the Chinese government saying that, oh, he is against you, he has a very different political view, very different political view with the state, and which will affect the career for sure.
I also read that there is a huge increase in cameras in China. They're mounting a lot of cameras. They're like from 176 million to have 450 million cameras installed by 2020. Yeah. The thing when you talk about China is that everything is huge numbers. So I don't really know if that is a lot compared to, for example, the UK, where they have a tremendous amount of cameras.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, you hit it on the nose. Like, I think the right metric is density, and in terms of density, they're pretty comparable with London, for instance, right? But it's almost besides the point, right? Because it's not about the cameras. Like, we've had security cameras forever, right, all over the world. It's about the protections on people who are caught on those cameras. Like, what do you do with that? So then when you think about facial recognition technology, right? That technology hasn't arrived yet to the point that it's perfect. It's sort of like the early days of DNA analysis, right? So if you think about someplace like here, or like a place where there's a lot of norms around privacy rights, if a criminal suspect gets caught on a facial recognition camera, there's a whole process after that. It's not that they're just sent to jail immediately, right? They'll have a trial, and there will be other evidence presented and all that stuff. In China, the issue is that you really don't have that kind of due process. You have a state where criminal courts are convicting about between 99.7 and 99.9% of suspects, right? So the question is, if these cameras make a mistake, then is that person going to be acquitted, or is it just going to be like, this is the technology and we're relying on it, and that's going to be it?
I wanted to, and maybe on a lighter note, because it's not very hopeful picture that you're drawing up for democracy in China here.
Yeah.
But like you use technology in order to create movements and create democracy, and obviously it has a good effect, you know. But also the government is turning on you. But if you're going to sort of weigh the possibilities for more information, obviously in China with 1.4 billion people, democracy will be difficult to conduct, and technology will of course make that more accessible to people as well as less accessible through oppression. So how do you see those two different roads to the future?
Yeah.
Like being positive for, you know, more democracy and people being able to express their opinions, or solely negative because the government will use it to oppress people?
I mean, I don't think it's really that binary. I think a lot of these technologies can have, you know, very beneficial impacts for communities. And I think, like, you know, China's not that different from a lot of countries in the West in the way that it's taken a while for people to realize that individual privacy is important. I mean, I'm from the US, and that's certainly been true in the US. It's taken a very long time for people to realize that we should have greater protections in that area. And in China, like, I mean, on the positive side, last June, they passed a cybersecurity law, and part of that was the notion that there should be categories of data that are protected, that these like big surveillance programs should not be delving into. And I guess, like, my guess is that's not going to apply to all people, but even if it applies to some people or a majority of people, that's still like a big step forward, because it encapsulates in law this philosophical notion that people do have those protections, I think. And I think it's kind of the public realization of how valuable privacy has now become in light of the spread of these new technologies. I think we're going to see kind of more campaigning from spheres like, if not civil society, like places like academia, you know, perhaps from foreign academics, from places inside China's parliament, and things like that.
Thank you. Shirry?
I would say in the civic society of Hong Kong, we are actually having a bad time now after the umbrella movement, because it's like we have so many people join the movement in 2014, but the government has done nothing for us. And this is quite disappointing for most of them. But the thing is, we do not have a crystal ball to tell us what is going to be in future. So what we are trying to do is that to help to keep the momentums going, and we would like to do more like civil educations, and we do more civil connections within Hong Kong, and also with the international world, and to be well prepared for the next, maybe the next time, next golden time. When the time is come, then we will have democracy.
Thank you so much, both of you. Give them a hand. So I'm going to invite up on stage our next panel, and I'm very happy to get up to me Aviv Ovadaya, who's a chief technologist at the Center for Social Media Responsibility at the University of Michigan. Please come up. He works to ensure that our online information ecosystem, as you call it, has a positive impact on society, which can certainly be needed in these days. Please come up. Oh, please do not come up. You have to wait for him to get his. But then I will invite up Torgeir Waterhouse, which is director of the Internet and New Medias in IKT Norway. I don't know what you... Yeah.
IT Norway.
IT Norway.
Yeah.
Please. And then we're also going to get up on stage Catharina Nes, who is a director in Datatilsynet, who's the government body that makes sure that our systems are protecting people and not abusing them. But so I wanted to start with you, Aviv. What are your comments on the previous panel and the situation evolving in China?
I mean, I think that the future, like everywhere else, is going to be very, very interesting in terms of what, especially AI, is going to bring to the table.
Yes.
It's very cool that you can have glasses that almost look like these that have built-in facial recognition, and it's also very interesting in terms of those are just being used by the police, it sounds like, in China. At least that was the story that I read a little while ago. And so I think that type of development and just sort of the greater ubiquity of this automation can sort of change the way in which societies function and govern and police. And we're going to see a lot of the amazing innovation happening, especially in China. And whether you want to call it innovation or not, it's an interesting word.
It's definitely new. So, Torgeir, what are your views upon the Chinese situation?
Well, combined with what I read about it and discussed about it previously, and then hearing the previous panel, I'd say that I'm very mixed on it, because I'm on one hand I'm not surprised at all. It's sort of been in the woodworks all along, and you mentioned Orwell yourself, so this is sort of like, it goes back a long way with the scare of this and what technology can do for us. At the same time, it's sort of like, I'm a bit glad it's out in the open, because then we can have a discussion about it. And one of the things I'm sort of looking forward to is, when will we have a discussion about international digital treaties and agreements like what we have with chemical weapons, and where we sort of really start to intrude in each other's nations and say, well, you can only go so far even though you're a different country from us. And the same with there's been previous discussions briefly about a digital Geneva Convention, etc. So those kinds of approaches to what are the really important issues to protect people now, these days, where it previously used to be chemical weapons or landmines or whatever, and now we're over in the digital sphere, and we need to really intrude in each other's countries.
Catharina, I wanted to bring you into the debate asking about the difference between commercial exploitation and government exploitation of people's data, because of course the trend the last couple of years and the discussions, at least in Norway and Europe and the US, has been a lot about companies getting hold of your data without your consent, or actually you do consent, you just consent to everything to be able to get the services. And of course, the situation in China, where the government has asked for all that information and is using it, is quite new. But I understand that it's a huge concern of yours at Datatilsynet that governments want to get access, can and will get access to more information. And you're, of course, working on that. Could you tell us a little bit about that? I know that there are several trials in the US and in Europe, but maybe it's more your,
yeah.
Like the difference
What
between.
A broad question. Well, where shall I start with? What is worrying? It is, of course, for us in Datatilsynet, and I guess in Western democracies, the development in China is extremely frightening, because this really shows the power of how you can use AI and big data for control and manipulation. And I think it is an enormous wake-up call in Europe to see how that we need a framework, that we need to develop big data and AI within a framework that protects the citizens, and that we use AI for the benefit for the people. And with the new GDPR, with this framework, there are some principles that protects the citizens and put some safeguards in there. So you cannot use data without, it has to be lawful, it has to be transparent, and the use of data needs to be fair. So there's awakening now among politicians in Europe. Emmanuel Macron, for instance, in France, has said that in France they will develop AI according to European values and put that high on the agenda.
Thank you. So you really believe in that policies and frameworks can control this, so it's not going to be, because it's not going to be as bad as people are afraid of?
I think that we are going into a future now with a lot of dilemmas, and even though China is far away, the way of thinking that you can use data to nudge people into behaving at its best is also the way of thinking that we have now in our neighboring countries, in Norway and in Western democracies. For instance, in Denmark, the government has recently proposed a profiling system. It will profile all families in Denmark and giving them points. And their aim is to detect families that do not take well care of their kids. But they will profile all families in Denmark. It's a proposal, giving them points. If the family is if the father or mother has a mental illness, they will have 3,000 points. If they are unemployed, they will have 2,000 points. If they do not show up to a dental appointment, they will have 1,000 points. So it's the same way of thinking, that you will incentivize families into behaving well, and that they will detect families where they do not take well care of their kids. But overall, it's
so that's actually basically the same thing they're doing in China. It's just for something that people will think is a good cause, and therefore you can do it.
Yeah. So the good causes can many times be, well, it's a challenge. They can have great privacy implications.
Yeah, what is it that they say? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Aviv, please comment on this. Either. No, on the path forward for controlling the use of technology. Is it possible? What can policies do?
Yeah, I think that there's a bunch of different actors that we need to consider. There's the companies, and those maybe you can regulate, especially if they're sort of legal companies, right? There are the illegal companies / organized crime. Harder to regulate. You can sort of try to figure out what's going on, but that becomes harder and harder as decentralized technologies take off. And that's a fairly large concern, given that money laundering is one of the things that basically sustains a lot of the non-free world, especially I think in say Europe and then there's the sort of individuals who are, there's academics, I guess, who also, are incentivized maybe by particular things, and regulation generally you don't usually think about it as applying to them, especially except in very specific cases, maybe like nuclear. And then there's individuals who can just sort of go on their own on their computer and make stuff. And it's very, very hard to regulate that in comparison. And a lot of these things are very hard to trace who's doing what. So even if you wanted to, you'd have to have almost like a panopticon, like a surveillance state, in order to prevent people from doing things with AI, whatever, that you wouldn't want them to do. And so there is this very, very interesting trade-off when, if you think about this as something that can have a very big, if there is something that you can do with, let's say, artificial intelligence, that can be very, very negative. If you want to prevent people from doing that, that may be actually fairly difficult depending on the sophistication of the thing and sort of what the open source community decides to do. And I think that that's something that we've definitely seen in a variety of domains.
I'm a lot older than you, so I actually lived in a time where privacy was something that you had. If you were somewhere and you did something, it was basically just the people there knowing about it, and if you were alone, there was certainly nobody knowing about what you did. I know you haven't actually. It's not an experience that you have, but
just for the record, I'm 30. I graduated from 2009.
I'm like 42, so
okay.
much older than you.
Okay.
So, but these enormous amounts of data that we have about all of us, does that mean that privacy is going to be something of the past?
Well, I think we need to have a discussion about what we mean about privacy. What does it mean to us? What is it? Because previously it was like nobody, as you said, nobody knows you're at that party. Nobody knows who you made out with. Nobody knows how drunk you were. Whatever. Yeah, it was fun. We had a blast. But now, in our context, we have to define what is privacy in our context, and sort of can we still hold on to the divide between companies and the criminals and the governments? Is that a relevant divide at all? If you look at one of the issues we're having these days, it's that we're trying to find out how do we handle very different sets of privacy regulations in parts of the world. And one thing we've done between Europe and the US is that following that the safe harbor failed, we got the privacy shield, which both sounds like bad action movies from the 80s. And at the same time, we're having the Cloud Act coming up in the US now that basically says that it doesn't matter what the people of the EU have regulated, because if the company is US-based in any way or form, a judge in the US can mandate that company to extradite data from their European operations and give to the police in the US. So this sort of is all being circumvented. And the question is, as you put to Catharina, can we trust the frameworks? And again, we get back to maybe, just maybe, especially given the bottom-up regulation of the internet and the whole sort of what's it called, multiple stakeholder approach to regulating it, also a lot of the time without government intervention. Maybe we're seeing the beginning of a huge shift in regulation and who's deciding what, because maybe a lot of the stories about moving from governments and nations to city-states and other sort of entities is what we're seeing the beginning of now with cryptography and with all the possibilities out there. And I think going forward, there'll be a huge potential for the most scary sci-fi movies.
Thank you, or not. Obviously, there is a lot happening on the policy front. The GDPR, the General Data Protection Directive, is a huge change. I think, like everyone, I received about 350 emails during the last couple of weeks, and so of course, being in a think tank, I desperately tried to say no to a lot of them, and then I just got completely overwhelmed and said yes to everything. But so I think policies are shaping up, right? We're starting to get a grip on the things that are already here. But shaping policies for things that aren't present is always difficult, and technology is developing so quickly. So do you think that policy has any chance of keeping up with what is happening technologically and the possibilities? Aviv first, and then...
I think that's one of the biggest challenges we're going to face over the next 10 to 20 years, I mean, and definitely beyond that. But who knows? It's going to get weird after that. So I don't comment. I think that, like, especially some countries have functioning democracies, like that can pass laws. I happen to be in one it's having some trouble, and so the United States. And we have this Congress thing. It sort of works sometimes. And I appreciate it. It just wish it could let's say stay up to date with what's happening, and I think that's going to be, even for some of the faster moving countries, we're going to really see challenges as the rate in which technology really impacts society is going to continue to accelerate, and I think that's one of the biggest and most important conversations we need to have. It's not even the specifics of like how do we deal with this problem, that problem, that problem. It's how do we improve our governance systems so that they can stay up to date and like basically just keep up with all of the really interesting, weird, crazy, scary, exciting, and wonderful things that are sort of coming down the pipeline.
Catherine, you actually work with this, how to secure people and how to apply and create policies. So what do you think?
We definitely do not believe that privacy is dead, and even though privacy has probably never been under more threat and pressure, it's still, we have a debate, more informed debate than we have ever had, and it creates a lot of attention. So we're quite optimistic. And with regards to the policy of keeping up, the old regulation was 20 years old, and on Friday we got the GDPR, an updated framework for how to handle privacy in the years ahead. And it's an very powerful piece of legislation, And the fact that you receive like 300 emails in your inbox, it shows the how it is on top of everybody's agenda and attention. So companies really worry and they really care, and I think they really will try to comply. That's an optimistic note. But there are some new pieces of, well, there are some new requirements in the law. For instance, a requirement to build the new technologies with the principles of privacy by design. So it's an encouragement to technologists to start thinking of privacy. The very first thing you do when you start building new systems, you build them so they are build privacy into the technology. So GDPR is not only for lawyers, it's also for technologists.
I wanted to finish up on talking about actual people and not the technology, because the technology is coming, but people are people. And should we try to make, people change in some way? Because the technology is coming, it's going to be super complex, it's going to be open up, but is there things or sides to people who can protect them from this, like you keep things more secret, or if it's more accepted that you step out of line, people finding out that you step out of line is not so difficult, critical thinking, things like that. Are these important parts of making a good society with all that technology that is coming? Aviv?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there definitely are things that we do need to change as people and just as citizens. I mean, the space that I'm very concerned about is sort of the way in which misinformation and is affecting society, and I guess the new vectors for it. First there was social media, and the way that wasn't sort of a new phenomenon, and the way that allowed sensationalist, misinforming, disinformation content to spread very easily. And then there's the sort of the next wave that's sort of we're on the edge of, where you have like fake videos that look completely real that you can just make on your phone in 30 seconds. It's not there yet, but it's coming. And they can just take your voice and make you say anything you want. And so there is going to be sort of an education component around that, and sort of a literacy thing. But I think one of the other things to keep in mind about all of this is that there's a lot of trade-offs that are very, very hard here, where you might by let's say not logging IPs for every time you access Facebook. Well, that means Facebook can't tell when there's some nation state and they're creating fake accounts and trying to manipulate public discourse. They can't know what's happening. They can't know that that's happening because they don't have a model of who you are. They don't have a model of who all the people are, and they can use to determine if you're a bad actor or a good actor. And so there are these really, really difficult trade-offs that you need to remember, where you are sort of really trading off privacy and security. And if you want your democracy to function, you may have to give up some other things in terms of enabling your discourse versus enabling your privacy from particular companies.
Thank you. Catherine, what should we do to make people more able to function well in this technology society?
I think you should start in school and to educate people from early on about privacy. Privacy is closely linked to freedom of speech, to democracy, and to educate this as an important human right from early on. And it's not about sharing data. It's not bad to share data, and it's a good thing. But people should be critical. But the most important thing is that we can trust the companies, that they are actually respecting how they collect data, that we have insights into how they collect them, and that the collection is transparent. So we should be critical, but still we must have trust in the companies and the government.
Torgeir?
Well, I think we need to make sure that we don't lose track of our core values. And we need to remind each other of them all the time, and because they might be under attack, not directly, but indirectly or without intention. And we need to make sure that people understand the consequences of technology. And we need to look into what type of leave room do we give people in their different types of jobs. Can a developer just say no to writing some code, like a soldier can say no and point to the Geneva Convention? Can they refuse an order or not? Where do we sort of draw the line from what is the individual's responsibilities? And of course, this idea of this affecting school is very, very important. If we look at something at least people our age in Norway remember, is that the bike day at school, where we got to ride our bike in the streets and learn how to navigate safely, because it's dangerous to get hit by a car. Now there's something else that's dangerous for us. We need to learn about that and handle that. And we need to also realize that people will, at least some people, will always try and misuse possibilities that are out there, and identify those and understand those and increase the social pressure. If you as an adult or a parent or whatever, say in this context of adults that this internet thing I don't understand, I just let the kids roam off, it's still socially acceptable. But if you say that, oh, I don't understand this feeding thing, my kids can manage to feed themselves, so everyone will ram down on you. So we need to sort of wake up and see that even though we don't understand it ourselves, we need to sort of build up a social context where we sort of take responsibility for each other as a society, and just sort of make sure we can actually handle this and continue to build good societies.
You can get.
How many points do you get if you don't know the internet?
How big a number can you handle?
I am going to do one very important thing before I let you all go. Thank you so much to the panel, but a special thanks to IKT Norway, who is co-hosting this event. Thank you so much to you all for sitting in and listening, and I hope you learned a lot. I most certainly did. And thank you so much to the three of you and the two of you. We are counting on you keeping us safe and private in the years to come, so please continue your good work. Thank you so much and have a lovely day.